Picture the 1960s living room. Shag carpet stretched wall to wall, a black and white television glowing softly in the corner, and a record player spinning the Beatles or Sinatra on a Saturday afternoon. The air felt charged with possibility. Every home seemed alive with little gadgets that made life easier, or at least more exciting. Some of those items are gone now, tucked away in attics or forgotten in thrift shops. But back then they defined the rhythm of family life. The decade carried an energy that was hard to miss. The suburbs were booming, houses were springing up in neat rows, and families filled them with the newest symbols of progress. The space race lit up imaginations, and every new invention felt like a step toward a brighter future. Having the latest gadget wasn't just about practicality, it was a matter of pride. It was proof that a household was modern, that it was keeping pace with the times. Televisions became more than screens. They were the heart of the home. Even when they broadcast in grainy black and white, families gathered around them as though they were fires in the hearth. Radios carried music and news through kitchens and garages, while record players gave teenagers a sense of ownership over their soundtracks. Kitchens filled with electric percolators, toasters, and blenders, each one advertised as a miracle of convenience. To own them was to feel a little more in step with the promise of the new American way. Every detail was wrapped in optimism. Gadgets symbolized not only comfort but also progress. Parents believed they were giving their children a better life, a life free from the drudgery they themselves had known. A shiny new appliance on the counter or a sleek radio on the nightstand carried with it the quiet assurance that the future was on its way. Advertisements spoke of freedom, efficiency, and modernity, and people listened. These machines were never just tools. They were status symbols, quietly announcing a family's place in the unfolding story of American progress. Of course, looking back now, it's easy to see how simple those gadgets really were. They had no screens to swipe, no buttons to light up, no promises of being smart. Yet, for families of the 1960s, they represented everything modern. They stitched themselves into daily life so thoroughly that it is hard to imagine a home without them. It is easy to be nostalgic about their hum, their clatter, their presence in homes across the country. For many, they are the soundtrack and scenery of memory. The click of a toaster, the soft crackle of a radio, the way the television screen flickered when someone bumped the antenna. Those small details shaped the feeling of belonging, of community, of being part of a time when progress seemed personal. But before gadgets became smart, America first fell in love with clever little devices that promised to change daily life. If you wanted to see the future in the 1960s, you looked no further than the kitchen counter. It was here that progress announced itself most loudly, with shiny chrome appliances and the promise of effortless living. Housewives of the era were told they were no longer just cooking. They were operating a command center of modern convenience. And to walk into a well-equipped kitchen was to step into what felt like tomorrow. The old stovetop coffee pot gave way to electric percolators and sleek countertop coffee makers. No more waiting for water to boil and hoping the brew turned out right. Now, at the push of a button, hot coffee bubbled up in minutes, filling the kitchen with a rich aroma that became a staple of morning life. The ritual of coffee had not changed, but the way it was made felt entirely new, efficient, and modern. Right beside it often sat the pop-up toaster, a gadget that became the symbol of mid-century breakfast. Families marveled at the way bread slices disappeared, only to spring back up golden and crisp, ready to be buttered. It was simple, but it felt like magic, and no kitchen was considered complete without one. Advertisers made sure of it, filling magazines and television screens with smiling families enjoying perfect toast before work and school. Blenders and hand mixers also found their place on countertops, marketed as essential tools for the modern homemaker. Suddenly, milkshakes, cake batters, and sauces could be whipped up with speed that would have amazed the generation before. To own one wasn't just practical, It was fashionable. Ads portrayed women as queens of their futuristic kitchens. Their worth tied not only to how they cared for their families, but to how current they were with the latest gadgets. And the appeal wasn't only in the machines themselves, but in what they made possible. The rise of convenience foods went hand in hand with these devices. Frozen TV dinners slid easily into ovens, promising complete meals with no fuss. Electric can openers took away the struggle of sharp lids and aching wrists, turning a simple act into one more symbol of progress. The kitchen became less a place of toil and more a stage for efficiency, designed to free up time or at least give the impression of it. These gadgets told a story about American identity. The kitchen was no longer just a room for meals. It was the heart of a home shaped by technology and optimism. Owning the latest appliance said something about who you were, how much you cared for your family, and how connected you were to the bright future everyone believed was just around the corner. And just beyond the kitchen, another device was buzzing its way into American homes. The soundtrack of the 1960s didn't just play on the radio, it lived inside every teenager's room. Music wasn't background noise. It was identity, rebellion, and freedom, all wrapped up in a melody. And the gadgets that carried those sounds were just as important as the songs themselves. For the first time, young people weren't just borrowing the family radio in the living room. They had their own way of tuning into the world. Portable transistor radios changed everything. They were small, cheap, and easy to carry, giving teenagers a sense of independence their parents never had. Suddenly, a kid could slip a radio into a pocket, tune into rock and roll, and feel connected to something bigger than their own neighborhood. It was private and personal, but also part of a cultural wave sweeping across the country. In parks, at beaches, or even under the covers late at night, those little radios carried the voices of Elvis, the Beatles, and Motown right into young hearts. Meanwhile, record players became the centerpiece of family living rooms. Sturdy consoles doubled as furniture, their polished wood and heavy speakers turning music into a shared experience. Families gathered around hi-fi stereos, listening together, whether it was Sinatra spinning on Sunday afternoon or the latest hit from the Supremes. For teenagers, those same record players meant stacking vinyls of their favorite bands, dropping the needle, and letting the room fill with music their parents didn't always understand or approve of. For the enthusiasts and hobbyists, reel-to-reel tape recorders offered a deeper way to capture and replay sound. Though bulky and less common, they represented the cutting edge of home audio. Collectors recorded live performances, made their own mixtapes, and marveled at the control these machines offered. Music in the 1960s wasn't just entertainment, it was a cultural marker. Gadgets became the tools of a social shift. Rock and roll was youth's declaration of independence, and having the right device to play it on was as important as the music itself. Radios and record players weren't just household items. They were gateways to identity, belonging, and sometimes rebellion. Parents listened to crooners and big bands. Their children cranked up electric guitars and soul singers. The divide between generations widened with every spin of the turntable. The gadgets of the decade didn't just carry sound. They amplified the feeling that the world was changing and that young people were the ones driving it. But sound wasn't the only way gadgets reshaped daily life. Vision was about to take center stage. Black and white to color television transformed the American family in a single decade. What began as a flickering box in the corner quickly became the centerpiece of nearly every living room. In the 1960s, TV wasn't just entertainment. It was furniture, technology, and culture all in one, commanding attention with its heavy wooden cabinet, glowing screen, and the promise of a world brought right into the home. These sets had their quirks. Rabbit ear antennas sat crookily on top, adjusted again and again in the hope of clearing the picture. Children were often asked to hold the antenna just like that while the evening news played. Dials clicked heavily, as viewers flipped through the few available channels, long before the convenience of remote controls. Yet, the effort only added to the experience. Families didn't complain about the inconvenience. They marveled at the fact that pictures and voices were even possible in their own living rooms. Television gave Americans a front-row seat to history. They watched President Kennedy's speeches and later mourned together as his funeral procession filled their screens. They tuned in to Ed Sullivan and saw the Beatles make their U.S. debut, sparking a cultural revolution. And in 1969, they sat breathless as the Apollo 11 mission broadcast humanity's first steps on the moon. For a few unforgettable moments, the entire country shared the same awe, gathered around glowing screens that made the impossible feel immediate and real. As televisions grew more common, other traditions began to fade. Drive-in theaters, once the most exciting way to spend a weekend night, slowly lost their appeal as families chose the comfort of home viewing. Even meals shifted. TV trays appeared in living rooms, and frozen dinners fit neatly into this new routine. Eating in front of the television became normal, reshaping not only habits but also how families experience time together. Despite these changes, the TV brought unity. Parents, children, and even grandparents shared the same shows, laughing at sitcoms or following the same dramas. In a way, the television created a new kind of hearth, one where stories, culture, and technology blended into the fabric of everyday life. The screen's glow became a defining light of the decade, changing not only what people watched, but how they lived. It wasn't just about programs. It was about identity, belonging, and a new rhythm of family life. But in the garage and basement, another set of gadgets quietly changed everyday work. Every dad in the suburbs had the latest tools, and half of them came in shiny chrome. The 1960s suburban garage was more than a place to park the family car. It was a workshop, a storage room, and for many men, a kind of personal retreat. Inside, shelves lined with boxes and hooks for hanging wrenches became symbols of independence and pride. Owning the right gadgets meant being prepared for whatever needed fixing, building, or trimming. Electric drills began showing up in garages across America, replacing the hand-cranked tools of earlier decades. They made weekend projects faster, from hanging shelves to repairing fences. Power saws also found their place, turning once daunting jobs into manageable tasks. For suburban homeowners, these gadgets weren't luxuries. They were proof of modern efficiency, evidence that progress had made its way into the most practical corners of life. Lawns, too, became part of the suburban identity. Push mowers were giving way to powered designs, complete with smoother cuts and easier handling. The sound of a mower starting up on a Saturday morning became part of the suburban soundtrack, a ritual that connected neighbors even as it divided yards. A neatly trimmed lawn wasn't just about appearance. It was about pride, a visible sign that a family cared for their little slice of the American dream. Other gadgets found their way into the toolbox. Reliable flashlights for late-night fixes, extension cords to reach new electric tools, and the first wave of battery-powered devices. Each one added to the sense that everyday challenges could be handled right at home. With the right tools, there was no need to call in outside help. The gadgets gave men of the era confidence in their ability to handle repairs and projects themselves. This was the start of a do-it-yourself boom. Hardware stores thrived as families bought kits and supplies, ready to tackle home improvements with the help of these new devices. Magazines and advertisements reinforced the image of the capable suburban handyman, standing proudly in his garage, surrounded by gleaming tools. For many, it wasn't just about fixing things. It was about building identity, showing resourcefulness, and passing skills along to children who watched and learned. The garage itself came to represent more than storage. It was a personal space where independence thrived. Tinkering with gadgets, tuning up the car, or building furniture became a weekend escape, a way of leaving the structured world of work while still feeling productive. In that mix of sawdust, oil, and metal, suburban life found both order and satisfaction. But not every gadget was about work. Many were designed simply for fun. From toy robots to Polaroid cameras, 60s gadgets made fun feel futuristic. Childhood in that decade didn't just mean playing outside until the streetlights came on. It meant experimenting with toys and devices that looked and felt like they came straight from the future. For families, these gadgets weren't just about distraction. They were about wonder, sparking imaginations in ways that left lasting memories. The Polaroid instant camera may have been the most magical of them all. With one click, a picture slid out, and after a few shakes, a moment was frozen forever. No waiting for film to be developed, no trips to the drugstore. Families could capture birthdays, first steps, or summer vacations right as they happened. Children watched in amazement as the image slowly appeared, turning a piece of blank paper into a memory. That little square photo was more than a gadget. It was a revolution in how people remembered their lives. For kids, playtime often meant gadgets that turned everyday afternoons into adventures. The Viewmaster gave them a way to travel the world without leaving the living room. Looking through the bright plastic viewer, they clicked through slides of faraway places, fairy tales, or cartoon characters, each frame glowing in vivid color. Slide projectors brought a similar thrill, letting families gather in darkened rooms to watch vacations or special events on the wall, turning living spaces into mini theaters. Toy robots, space guns, and chemistry sets carried the excitement of the space race into backyards and bedrooms. Children built rockets, mixed bubbling potions, and imagined themselves as scientists or astronauts. These gadgets weren't just toys. They were reflections of a world racing toward the future, giving kids a taste of adventure they saw on television and in magazines. Even cars became part of the fun. Radios built into dashboards meant music and entertainment on the move, turning long drives into sing-alongs and giving teenagers their own private escape with the roll of a window. The sense of portable fun defined a new kind of freedom wherever you went. A gadget could make the experience brighter. And who could forget the hula hoop? Though simple, it blended seamlessly with gadget culture. Its colorful plastic ring became a sensation, showing that even the simplest invention could sweep across the country and define an era of play. In the 1960s, gadgets weren't just tools. They were joy in physical form. They blurred the line between technology and play, teaching a generation that the future wasn't only about work and progress. It was about laughter, imagination, and shared memories. Childhood had always been about fun, but now it had a futuristic twist. But while kids played, adults looked for gadgets that offered speed, convenience, and connection. The 1960s didn't invent the internet, but it gave us the first taste of being connected. The gadgets of the era hinted at a world where communication could be faster, easier, and more direct than ever before. They didn't involve screens or digital networks, but for the people who used them, they carried the same sense of excitement and novelty that smartphones bring today. One of the clearest signs of this future was the arrival of touch-tone phones. Replacing the familiar rotary dials, these sleek devices used buttons that made sharp, modern tones with every press. It felt futuristic to families who had grown up waiting for the wheel of a rotary to spin back into place. Calling someone no longer felt like a chore. It felt quick, efficient, and stylish. At the same time, early versions of answering machines made their way into offices and some homes. Bulky and mechanical, they were far from the tiny devices we know today, but they introduced the idea that a message could be left even when a person wasn't there to pick up. For busy professionals, this was groundbreaking, changing the way business was done and hinting at a more connected world. Long-distance calling also became more accessible, shedding its reputation as something rare and expensive. Families spread across states could stay closer, hearing voices instead of waiting weeks for letters. Those connections, powered by wires and signals, shrank the country in ways people had never imagined before. In offices, dictaphones and other recording gadgets gave workers the ability to capture notes, memos, and letters without pen and paper. Secretaries and executives relied on them as symbols of efficiency and authority, reinforcing the growing sense that gadgets weren't just luxuries, they were necessities of modern life. Even in schools and workplaces, the shift was clear. Early calculators began replacing slide rules, turning complex equations into quick solutions. For students and engineers, this change felt like stepping into the future. The tools no longer required hours of manual effort. Numbers and answers appeared almost instantly, a preview of the instant information that future decades would deliver in larger ways. Every one of these devices carried with it a sense of transformation. Communication felt faster. Work felt easier. The world felt just a little more connected. And while they may seem quaint or outdated now, at the time they were bold reminders that the future was already arriving, one gadget at a time. And sometimes, these futuristic tools seemed like more than just gadgets. They were symbols of America's ambitions. From Tang drink mix to astronaut pens, the space race touched every kitchen drawer and toy box. In the 1960s, outer space wasn't just something people read about in newspapers. It was part of daily life. The race to the moon filtered down into ordinary homes, where gadgets and toys carried the thrill of exploration and made families feel connected to history in the making. NASA's influence on consumer products was everywhere. Suddenly, the foods, tools, and designs once reserved for astronauts began showing up on store shelves. Freeze-dried meals promised a taste of the future, and though few families actually replaced dinner with them, the novelty of eating like the men in space was irresistible. Tang, the orange drink powder promoted as an astronaut's choice, became a household staple. For kids, pouring a glass wasn't just about flavor. It was about imagining themselves floating in zero gravity, sipping the same drink as heroes circling the Earth. Even the simplest gadgets felt extraordinary when linked to space travel. The astronaut pen, capable of writing upside down or in weightless conditions, turned into a cultural sensation. It wasn't just a tool. It was proof that space-age science had practical uses for everyday life. Owning one meant holding a piece of the future right in your hand. For children, the space craze exploded in the form of toys. Model rocket kits, shiny plastic helmets, and astronaut costumes filled toy aisles. Families gathered in backyards to watch small rockets blast off into the air, while kids dreamed of growing up to join NASA. Science fiction no longer felt distant. It blended seamlessly with everyday play. The gadgets of the decade fed imagination, making the impossible feel possible. Design itself also reflected the era's fascination with the cosmos. Chrome finishes, atomic starburst patterns, and furniture shaped like rocket fins or satellites captured the aesthetic of a country gazing upward. Even kitchen appliances carried futuristic curves and metallic shine, echoing the excitement of rockets and space stations. Every gleaming surface reminded people that they were living in an age of discovery. Above all, these gadgets symbolized American pride. Every Tang packet mixed, every toy rocket launched, and every shiny chrome gadget on display was a quiet nod to the nation's ambition. They made the space race personal, transforming global competition into tangible, everyday excitement. For a generation raised on moon missions and sci-fi dreams, these objects blurred the line between reality and imagination. They weren't just products. They were symbols of a country daring to reach further than ever before. But as exciting as the gadgets were, their disappearance tells us something about America itself. They may sit in dusty attics now, but these gadgets once told the story of who we were. A Polaroid camera with its yellowed plastic, a transistor radio with scratches from being carried everywhere, a toaster that still hums faintly when plugged in. These were not just objects. They were witnesses to a decade filled with optimism, change, and imagination. In their chrome edges and colorful buttons, they carried the hopes of families who believed the future was close enough to touch. The gadgets of the 1960s mirrored the culture that created them. In every suburban kitchen, electric percolators and blenders spoke of convenience and progress. In bedrooms and living rooms, record players and televisions reflected a society discovering the power of sound and image. Even the toys, the Viewmasters, toy rockets, and plastic robots revealed the dreams of a generation raised in the shadow of the moon race. Each item, no matter how small, shaped how families lived and how they saw themselves in the larger American story. Some of those devices evolved into the tools we carry today. Calculators grew smaller until they fit in a pocket, then merged into the smartphones now glued to our hands. Televisions shed their heavy wooden frames and became flat screens that dominate walls. Coffee makers turned digital, radios became streaming apps, and cameras disappeared into phone lenses. The essence of the old gadgets still lingers in the technology we use every day, even if their shapes have changed beyond recognition. Others vanished completely, remembered only in the minds of those who once used them. The slide projectors, the clunky answering machines, the early space-age toys no longer serve a practical role, yet they remain unforgettable for the feelings they carried. Nostalgia clings not to their efficiency, but to their charm, their quirks, the way they make people smile. They remind us of a time when progress was measured in small, tangible steps, when flipping a switch or pressing a button felt like magic. The story of these gadgets is really the story of memory itself. Progress keeps moving forward, but memory holds on to the things that once defined us. What we keep and what we lose says as much about our values as about technology. The gadgets of the 1960s showed us how to dream, how to connect, and how to imagine the future through metal, plastic, and glass. Even today, when someone pulls an old transistor radio from a box or finds a forgotten Polaroid photo in a drawer, the feeling that comes rushing back isn't about the gadget at all. It's about belonging to a time when the world felt new and exciting. That is the true gift of these forgotten machines. They remind us that history doesn't just live in books or films. It lives in the objects we once loved. Which 60s gadget do you miss most? Share your memories in the comments below.